This happened during Christmas break. My friend Mark was home alone for the weekend. His wife had taken their 4-year-old son to visit her parents out of state, so their little suburban house was empty except for him. He texted me that night and asked if I wanted to come over, have a few beers, and play games. So I did. Mark lived in a pretty normal house at the edge of a quiet neighborhood. 2 floors, a small front lawn, a garage on the side, Christmas lights still hanging from the gutters. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would make you think twice. We started playing around 9 that night and stayed in the basement for hours. Sometime after 1 in the morning, I paused the game and told Mark I needed to use the bathroom. I left the basement and went upstairs. The house was dark except for a small light over the kitchen sink. It was so quiet that I could hear the refrigerator humming from the other room. Then I heard music. Just a few notes. Thin, cheap electronic music. The kind that comes from a toddler's toy when the batteries are almost dead. It played for a few seconds, stopped, then started again. I stood in the hallway, listening. The sound wasn't coming from the living room. It wasn't coming from Mark's son's bedroom either. It sounded like it was coming from the garage. I went back downstairs and asked Mark, "Do you have some kind of toy on in the garage?" He took off his headset and looked at me. "What?" "I hear music," I said, "like a kid's toy." He frowned. "That's not possible. My son's toys are packed away." But the music was still playing, so we both went upstairs. When Mark opened the door to the garage, the sound became clearer. The garage was freezing. It smelled like gasoline, cardboard, and old wood. There were Christmas decoration boxes stacked against the wall, an old car seat, and a few plastic storage bins in the corner. The music was coming from behind the bins. Mark moved a few things out of the way and pulled out a child's ride-on Jeep. A red Power Wheels Jeep. The kind a little kid can sit in and drive around the driveway. It was covered in dust. The second Mark dragged it into the open, the music stopped. He crouched down and checked the switch underneath. It was off. Mark stared at it for a moment. Then he said, "My son hasn't used this thing in 2 years." I asked if it still worked. He shook his head. "The remote has been missing forever, and even if the battery is still inside, it should be completely dead by now." Neither of us said anything for a few seconds. Then Mark laughed a little and said it was probably just old wiring. Maybe moisture had gotten into it. Maybe something had shorted out. I agreed, mostly because I wanted to believe that too. Still, Mark didn't want it sitting in the garage anymore. He said, "I'll throw it out in the morning." So we dragged the little Jeep inside and left it by the front door. Then we went back downstairs and kept playing. Around 3 in the morning, we finally gave up. Mark told me I could crash in the guest room, and he went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to a silent house. I walked out of the guest room and headed toward the bathroom. That was when I noticed the space by the front door was empty. The red Jeep was gone. I figured Mark had woken up early and thrown it away. Then I stepped into the living room. Mark was sitting on the couch. No TV, no coffee, no phone in his hand. He was just sitting there, pale, staring at the carpet in the middle of the room. I asked, "You already threw the Jeep out?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I heard it again last night." I thought he meant the music. He did. He told me that around 4 in the morning, the same little song woke him up. At first, he thought the toy had started malfunctioning again. He got out of bed, annoyed more than scared, and went downstairs to pull the battery out. But when he reached the front door, the Jeep wasn't there. The music was still playing. only now it was coming from the living room. Mark said he turned around and saw the red ride-on Jeep slowly coming out from behind the couch, not sliding, not bumping into things, driving slowly. The little steering wheel was turning left and right. The Jeep moved around the coffee table, avoided the edge of the rug, and passed between the TV stand and the armchair without touching either one. That was the part that scared him, because if it was just bad wiring, the thing should have driven straight until it hit something. But it didn't hit anything. It moved like it knew where the furniture was. Then it crossed the room, came right up to Mark, and stopped at his feet. The music cut off. Mark said he stood there for a long time, waiting for it to move again. It never did. Just before sunrise, he dragged it outside and threw it into the neighborhood dumpster. I tried to give him a normal explanation. I said, "We should go get it back and open it up. Maybe the steering is stuck. Maybe the circuit board is fried." Mark shook his head immediately. "That thing sat in the garage for 2 years," he said. "Even if the battery was still inside, it should have been dead." Then he looked at me and lowered his voice. "And what if we open it up and there's no battery in it?" I didn't say anything after that. I stayed with him for a while that morning. Eventually, Mark said we should just leave it alone. He had already thrown it into the neighborhood dumpster. As long as we didn't touch it again, maybe that would be the end of it. At the time, I wanted to believe that. But when I was getting ready to leave, I walked to the front door to put on my shoes. And I stopped. The red ride-on Jeep was sitting beside the door, in the exact same spot where we had left it the night before. There were dark streaks of water on the plastic body, and both wheels were coated with wet mud from the alley behind the dumpsters. Mark stood behind me without saying a word. I didn't say anything either, because we both knew he had dragged it outside before sunrise. We both knew he had thrown it away. And now it was back. No music came from underneath it. The steering wheel didn't move. It just sat there quietly, like it had returned to where it belonged.